How's it going, everyone? Titanhawk here, and today I will show you how to get a channel ID using the YouTube API. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So to start this video off, we will begin by reviewing the YouTube data API documentation. Here we're going to be going under the channels and under the list. What this is going to do is we're going to pass in a search key for a YouTube channel. So this can be the channel name that you expect, and from there we will get a list of results. So here you can see some common cases that you can list by channel ID, by YouTube username. You can list your channel if you have the correct authorization. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. Here as well, we're going to see the endpoint that we need to hit. So this will be a GET request at this endpoint. Again, we'll work on that in this video. And then here is some authorization, which we will also handle as well. You don't need to worry about this, as we have a separate way to do this. Scrolling down a little bit more, you can see that this is what's going to be the part and the required parameters here. So for us, we're looking for channel ID. We are going to pass in our part as an ID here. We don't need to pass in any other ones. We just need to pass in ID. But if you want to see some of the other data that you can get, you can go ahead and switch out part to equal content details or content owner details or snippet or statistics instead of just ID. I'll probably go through some of these in a later video in the series, but for today we're going to focus on ID. Then you continue scrolling down here, you're going to see that we need to filter this data, specify exactly one of the following parameters. So this would either be category ID for username ID, managed by me, or mine. For this video, the filter that we're going to use is for username, and we're going to pass in a username to prove that this works correctly. So now that we've gone over the documentation, we can go ahead and start coding. Jumping back here into vscode, you can see there are a couple changes since the last video. If you remember mentioning, I did not have the typescript.config.json file ready in the first video, but I have it available here. So this is all you're going to need to pass in. You're just going to need to create in here. You're going to have the compiler options, the target being ES 2022. You can use older versions, but just for the sake of this video, we're going to start with 2022. Then you're going to want to make sure you have modules at the common.js, resolve JSON module true. That way, if we ever need to import JSON files such as constants or anything, we can go ahead and do that here. And then you're going to want to pass in some of these others. I'll leave this on screen here for a second, that way you can pause the video and add them, but this is all you're going to need for this. Also, the second thing I've created is an axios service inside of our services folder over here to the right. This is going to just simply export an instance of the axios service. That way we can go ahead and access this from our YouTube service to send our GET request to the YouTube API. Then I've also created a YouTube service, it just currently exports a YouTube service empty object that we're going to add to in this video. But the first thing that we're going to do first is we need to create a custom model for the channel response. So luckily I've already gone ahead and tested out this API. If you want to go ahead and test it out, you can use an API requesters or an API IDE, I stumbled over my words there, such as Insomnia or Postman. That way you can see the kind of data you can expect to receive. So we can go ahead and start with export interface, channel ID response. Now this will be specific to our channel ID function that we're going to create. That way we know the exact data we're going to get, but you can go ahead again and extract some of the common types here to a other file. That way it's easier to read your code and be less redundant. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and do this. So we're going to start with our kind, which is going to be a type string, our e-tag, which is going to be a type string as well. We're going to have our page info be an object. Oop, that should be a colon and not a semicolon. This will be total results, which will be a number. This will be results per page, which will also be a number. And then we're going to have our items, which is going to be an object containing a kind, which is a string, an e-tag, which is also a string, and our ID, which is a string. We are looking for the ID, and we're going to actually get these as a list. That way, if multiple channels come up in our search results, we're going to get a multitude of them. So we can go ahead and save this, and this looks pretty good. We are now ready to start our YouTube service. So back here in the YouTube service file, the first thing we're going to want to do is at the top, we're going to want to import a couple of things. First, we're going to want to import our we're going to want to import, whoops, it should be config from .env, and then we're going to want to call config. This is going to load in our API key, as we're going to make sure we pass that in to all of our API calls. That way we prove that we have authorization. The next thing we want to do is you're going to notice that all of the YouTube API endpoints have a common base URL. So for that, I have this copied to my clipboard, and we can go ahead and just paste this here into our code. And this is just going to be the base URL that we're going to use for all of our API calls. You can see we're going to extend this a little bit, but this will be the base of it. The next thing we can do is we can go ahead and create our get channel ID function. So we're going to do const get channel ID, which is going to be an async function. And it's going to take in a username of type string. And we don't know the return type, so we're going to leave that empty for now. But now we can go ahead and start using our Axios service. So we can say our response is going to be await Axios service dot get. And then we're going to want to pass in to the type that we're expecting. It's going to be a channel ID response. And then here is where we're going to need to provide some information. So the first thing that we're going to do is we need to pass in our URL, which is going to be, we can use the ticks to be put in our base URL. And this will be /channels. That way it looks here at the channels endpoint. And then optionally, we need to provide some configs and some params. So with this, as you can tell by the documentation, it requires some search params to refine the search. So this will be of type any, and this will automatically match up everything for us. So what we can go ahead and do is in our params, since we're searching by username, we're gonna need to pass a param that is for username. And this will be not of type string, sorry. This will be our username parameter. And then we need to pass in our key, which is going to be our API key, which we can get from process.env.api_key. Again, this should be in the .env file that we stored in the first video. So we can go ahead and save this so far, and we are almost ready. So the first thing that we are going to want to go ahead and do is say if the response.data.items.length is greater than 0, we can go ahead and return the first result, as we can expect that, hey, if we provide the exact username, we should get only one top hit. And this can just be return response.data.items@index0.id. Otherwise, if this returns a list of 0 items, we can go ahead and just say return not found. And by this point, you can probably guess it, the return type for this function is going to be a string. Oh, sorry, yep, and this will actually be a promise string. And it's only going to be a promise string simply because when we are using the async keyword, this always means it's going to be promised, so we always have to make sure we wait for it, which pretty much means we use the await keyword and it'll handle everything else for us. Then the last thing we got to do before we test is we just go down here and say, in our YouTube service, just export our method get channel ID, save, and we are ready to test. So in between clips, I actually just ran a test, and as it turns out with the YouTube API, it is not perfect with getting smaller channel information. So for instance, at the time of recording this, I very much consider myself a smaller channel, as I don't have as many subscribers as some of the larger channels like Mr. Beast, and basically I do work. So if you were to search up your channel and it is considered small to YouTube standards, it will return items as undefined. So we're going to go back in here and change our items to also be of type undefined. And this is going to require us to then go inside of here and say that we also need to say, hey, if the response.data.items is not equal to undefined, and it's actually has a length greater than 0, then we can go ahead and test this out. So I've gone ahead and I've blanked this out right here. I will go ahead and undo it. And then we can just go ahead and delete my little comment here. And we are ready to test. So if you remember from the last video, we set up something in our package.json to be npm start, and this will go ahead and run our code for us. So we can let this run for a quick second and we go ahead and see our results. So as you can see here with my channel, the user or the ID, was not found for it. But for the more popular, basically I Do Work YouTube channel, we have the ID here. So we pretty much just proved that, hey, our get channel ID does work. Even though it doesn't exactly always return an ID with smaller YouTube channels, that is perfectly fine because it does work for larger, more popular channels, which might be something we're trying to get data of to understand why they are as successful. So this concludes this tutorial. If you've enjoyed this content, please be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel if you are new, as it always helps me out in the long run. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. Otherwise then, my name is TitanHawk17, wishing you all a fantastic rest of your day wherever you may be.